Good morning and welcome to the reconvened conference committee on House Bill 1278. I'm happy that everybody is back together today. Hopefully we all are solemnly remembering that this is the 80th anniversary of D-Day. So now we can get down to business, and the request from the House is for the Senate to recede from their amendment and accede to the House position.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, in light of the fact that there's been an agreement on Senate Bill 499 that I think Comfrey signed off on,
Except Senator Bradley hasn't signed off yet.
but I'm going to.
Oh, great.
Okay.
You heard it here.
I think we can accede to the House position. So,
Thank you.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. And all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And House Conferees, do you agree to put this on consent? Yes,
Can you do that?
the House can.
No, I don't
Not the
think we
Senate.
can, but
Okay. So the House will put this on consent. Thank you very much. I will get this filed so that we can get it signed before the rush later on today. Thank you so much, and I appreciate you all. And with that, we'll close the conference committee on 1278.
We will open the committee conference on House Bill 1593. I'd like to begin with a memory. The very first bill that I ever introduced in the Senate, Senator Bradley was on the committee, and I wasn't prepared for his first question, which was, tell us the process by which the bill came before the Senate. And I thought, Senator Bradley's a smart guy and pretty experienced, and he doesn't know the process, so I asked him to clarify. And he said, no, what happened in the policy committee, what was the vote, then what happened on the House floor? Was it a consent bill or not? And I saw then, thank you, the value of getting that on the record. I would like to ask the same question with this proposal, how it came before us today.
Much, Mr. Chair. I guess turnaround's fair play, right?
I've waited years for it, thank you.
All right, so it's a long story, but I'll try to make it as brief as possible. The existing Met-Dish settlement between the hospitals and the state of New Hampshire expires at the end of this fiscal year. So there was always need for legislation. So several of us in the Senate started early on, maybe in November or December, I think the three of us, having discussions about it. In January, Governor Sununu suggested that it really should run through the Attorney General's office. We agreed, and we waited for that process to unfold. It took a little bit longer than I think any of us had anticipated. I had hoped to be able to file a late bill in the Senate, but there was no agreement. So we decided after the, time was getting nigh in late February to file a late bill to propose an amendment to a House bill, have a public hearing, and bring it to the House, hoping that there was going to be a settlement between the Attorney General's office and the Hospital Association. So I think a lot of people worked diligently. Certainly the governor did, Henry Lipman, the state Medicaid director did, the Hospital Association, Steve Anand did, the Attorney General's office did, and I think agreed on basic parameters, but not all parameters. And so it went to a public hearing in the Senate, and we adopted an amendment that you see before you as the Senate passed version of the bill. So that's what's happened. Had we had the opportunity to file a late bill with something ready to go, you folks in the House would have had the opportunity to have a public hearing. It just, unfortunately, because these are complicated issues, it's been subject, the Met tax has been subject to litigation in the past. The state has lost that litigation, and I'm happy to provide the 2014 Superior Court decision. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think Jess already had it. I gave it to him.
If this is the only copy, I can.
No. I have other copies. I think I gave one to Erica too. Okay, so. Thank you. There's been litigation on this in the past, and if I can try in the simplest terms to summarize the litigation, the Medicaid enhancement tax is levied on net patient revenue of hospitals. So that includes both outpatient and inpatient services. The reason the tax, which raises about $320 million of revenue for the state of New Hampshire, has been found unconstitutional is that identical services that are offered by other providers, similar to hospitals, but not hospitals, for instance, it could be an ambulatory surgery center, it could be physical therapy, it could be any number of other exact identical services, is not subject to the Medicaid enhancement tax. So I think the conclusion of the court in 2014 was that the tax was unconstitutional. So my understanding is there have been two settlements that the state has entered into, and the latest settlement, which returns 91% of the generated revenue back to the hospitals for distribution to the 26 hospital members, that settlement expires in a month or less. And so the need for legislation, and again, that's the process. Apologies to our friends in the House that you haven't had a chance to really vet this as well as we have, although we also didn't have a lot of time to vet it. But this amendment, this bill, with the Senate amendment, did have a public hearing in Senator Gray's Finance Committee.
Representative Edwards?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that summary, Senator. I'm glad that I've had the opportunity to talk with you and others about this bill in the last 72 hours. And what I think I see fairly clearly, the complicating issue for the House representatives here is that this could be the greatest bill ever, and it never saw a single meeting or conversation amongst House members. And so the effective request of this committee of conference is to get 4 out of 400 House members to agree to the good work of the Senate. And that's a huge responsibility if we were to accept it. And as I've slept on it a couple of nights, I think where I've come to fall is that for us one percenters to speak for the 400, I think what we need to do is to make sure that what we're doing is really right and vital and timely, be confident in what we do, and also to be as minimalistic as we can so that we don't overrun our, lean over our skis too far and take on more than what we should. I think we need to be conservative in this committee of conference about what the House position can be, because we haven't had a proper opportunity to develop a House position. And I know all the good work you've done with all the people. I know how difficult this is. I really respect that whole process of yours. But I'm just letting you know that, although I'm generally in support of the need to do this, I personally will be wanting to be cautious about how much we take on.
And I totally appreciate it. And it's really nobody's fault that we are here on June 6th at the deadline of committee of conference. This is complicated. It's contentious. It's been subject to litigation. A lot of money is at stake. The viability of hospitals is at stake. The impact on the general fund and the state of New Hampshire for revenues is at stake. And at the end of the day, our healthcare system, I think, is at stake. And so I couldn't agree with you more, Representative Edwards, that it would have been helpful had we had more time to vet this. I totally understand it. So if I could, Mr. Chair, maybe walk through the amendment and try to hit the highlights of it.
Yes, please.
All right, so I'm assuming because the House does such a great job of side-by-sides that there are side-by-sides. Okay, well, I'll do my best then. I'll be bouncing back and forth between the amendment and the underlying Senate bill. So the first part of the bill is the underlying bill. So really the hospital piece starts on page 2, line 8. where there's a definition of hospitals and hospital Medicaid payments. That's section 2 and 3. Okay, so that's my understanding is that's recreating language that was in a previous settlement. So really no change is my understanding. And Henry can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that's my understanding. So in the Senate version, in order to mitigate the impact on hospitals, we moved the 91%, which is the current rate of dollars flowing back to the hospital from the Met tax, to 93%. But that was deemed unacceptable to, all the parties that, or at least some of the parties that worked all winter and spring on it. So the first change in the amendment is to go back to 91%. So if you're looking at the amendment, it's on line 5. If you're looking at the bill, it's line 29. So 91 becomes 93. And so just think of it this way, that every 1% of $300 million is about $3 million. Okay, so it reverts $6 million back to the state. One of the things that is being proposed here, both in the bill, and I think this is important. So if you go to the bill on page 2, on the bottom of page 2, there is language that gives the commissioner of the Department of Health and Human Services the authority to determine method or methods used to make Medicaid payments subject to Medicaid reimbursement. And obviously it has to be approved by the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services. But the hope in doing this is to move away from the current structure into what's known as more directed payments. By going to directed payments, we take advantage of the 90-10 match under Medicaid expansion, and that increases revenue for the state, okay? But when you do that, there are hospitals that are in different places in terms of their cost structure. So whether it's the acuity level of patients, whether it's the uncompensated care level of patients, the number of patients that have insurance, all of those things factor into that 91% going back. So it fluctuates from year to year. The point of allowing this language now is to take advantage of better reimbursement rates, which means a win-win for the state and mitigating the impact of 91% on hospitals. Because remember, they pay a tax, but they get 91% back, and it's allocated amongst the hospitals, the 91%, based on this patient mix and acuity level. So that is kind of outlined in page 2, section 3, and it gives, oh, I'm so sorry. I've gotten ahead of myself. No one has the amendment. I have them here somewhere. I thought they had been provided.
Thank you, Jenny.
My apologies. Take care of it. You just start talking. All right. So then, moving on to page 3, it outlines sort of the bottom of page 2 and page 3, what the parameters of how this authority is given to the commissioner. And this is pretty important. In determining which method to utilize, the commissioner shall seek to prevent to the greatest extent possible year-over-year hospital reimbursement reductions in the aggregate, while at the same time achieving the highest available federal match. So that's the goal of everything that is trying to be done, okay? So then the rest of page 3 is largely boilerplate that is consistent with the existing settlement with the hospitals. Okay, so then moving on to page 4, the next big change in the amendment is that we move from 7%, which is line 20 of the bill, to 9%, which is line 14 of the amendment. And that gets back to the 91%. So 9% then gets funneled into other healthcare services. Okay. So that is consistent with the position that, you know, the Attorney General's office took as to what the ultimate disposition of the settlement should look like. Next change is, and this is the critical change that I hope that we can buy into, but I'm not suggesting that the Attorney General's office or the Governor's office is fully supportive of. Top of page 5 in the bill versus lines 23 on the amendment, section 13 and 14. So there would be a directed payment of $5.7 million of state funds to mitigate the losses that the hospitals will experience. Some hospitals are going to do better than today based on their patient mix, but some won't. And that's just a factor of trying to maximize state revenue and move away from the dish portion of how we've distributed this revenue, which, by the way, is a CMS and federal requirement at this point to be moving away. So we get the advantage of more revenue and we're more in compliance with federal rules. So we make this $5.72 million payment that is matched by, I believe it's $8.6 million of federal funds to create a $14.3 million additional help, if you will, for the hospitals to mitigate against the red ink that many of them will experience without that $14.3 million. There is still, and I believe this spreadsheet has been shared with folks, but if not, we'll make sure it is. Even after this $14.3 million, there are still several hospitals that will be in the red vis-a-vis their payment from previous years to what's anticipated in future years. Now, these are all subject to audit and change from year to year, again, depending on your patient acuity. But the hospitals, while they're not thrilled about this, have agreed that this is something that they can accept and live with, even despite the fact that 6 hospitals have red ink. The generated net revenue is anticipated, and this is the last thing on the amendment. It's the statement of intent on line 4, that as a result of all of this, the state will net $22 million of new revenue, both $11 million of Medicaid enhancement tax revenue, which then gets matched. So while no one's happy with this, certainly the hospitals aren't, certainly I think the folks that negotiated this are not, it's still, I think, a rational way to proceed. Because, and then I'll stop after this, Mr. Chair, I think if you look at, and I believe I passed out the 2014 court case, it's pretty clear to me when I read this that the med tax has been held to be unconstitutional because it applies the same taxes, doesn't apply, excuse me, the same tax for exact same services. It does apply to hospitals. It doesn't apply to other service providers. And as such, has been ruled unconstitutional. So in the absence of an agreement or acquiescence on the part of the hospitals to pay the tax, there's likely to be litigation. What is the impact of litigation? I think no one knows. And I would say, I'm certainly not going to be here next year, but most of you will. And if there's litigation that puts into doubt $320-ish million of general fund revenue to the state, I would argue that that's not a good way to proceed, which for the relatively small cost of $5.72 million matched by $8.6 million of federal revenue makes this a rational way to proceed.
Representative Strang.
Thank you for all that. Representing, I guess, the House side and following on both your comments and Chairman Edwards, kind of our experience with the hospitals as part of the budget process was pretty positive. We were brought forward a certain fixed amount of money to deal with Medicaid rate increases, and we're challenged with the exercise of prioritizing services over another in a way that might improve the overall effectiveness of the healthcare system. The Hospital Association kicked us off by saying, you know what, don't give us anything. We have problems with patients being stuck in emergency rooms and in the hospitals, and we can't get them out. If you can prioritize the money in a way that provides places for those people to go, you're going to help us, and it's going to help the whole system. And that really started the ball rolling for us in what was part of the what's called the miracle budget, and in prioritizing nursing homes and at-home care, and really taking a look at every one of the Medicaid programs, and even with the final $40 million that came available in the last 24 hours before the budget passed with a gavel in the House, there was still no money for the hospitals. So, and not having experience, with this particular amendment here, we come in with a mindset that that the hospitals representatives here are, if they're asking for funds and change in way to do things, that we're going to listen very, very hard based on the experience that we had in this 2 years. In terms of your presentation of the amendment, seeing the previous 93% being brought down to 91%, the emphasis on services that would be eligible for the 90-10 federal match instead of a 50-50 match, and a relatively not insignificant, but one that multiplies additional appropriation from the general funds. I'm very, very inclined to support this amendment as you presented it here. But I'm also eager to hear from those who've spent more time on the MET and the dish payments as well. Thanks.
Senator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have been serving on Finance Committee through both prior settlements. And I guess I should say that we can't just, if we don't go forward with this, we can't just extend the life of the settlement that's running out in 3 weeks, because the federal rules around dish payments have changed. So that's really not an option for us. And I think the constitutionality is a real thing. We changed the statute to fix the constitutional problem back, I think, either in 2016 or 18. And at that time, maybe it was 18, the hospitals acknowledged that the statute was constitutional. So it got us out of ongoing expensive litigation. And I think that that background, I hope, will be helpful.
Representative Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to introduce the handout that came out while the speaking taking place. I thought of this when I heard Senator Bradley mention how good the LBA is at doing side-by-sides. And so I had asked the Division III LBA to put together a side-by-side of the current law versus what the Senate proposal was, because coming new to this, what the viewpoint I needed was to see what our current law is and what are we proposing to do to change it. And I'm bringing this to you way too late in the process, and it may not have any practical use. But I did want to make it available to just let Senator Bradley know that there was some effort by the LBA to do a side-by-side. And I should have distributed it sooner. That's on me.
Representative Leon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As somebody not on House Finance, I have put on my scuba gear and dove deep into these numbers to understand them. But numbers are something I have some experience with. I'm trying to understand how this 91% plus these additional funds really translate, because if we look at the 5.72%, that's approximately another 2%. But I'm trying to understand how we are able to have the 14.3 million additional and how we can sort of compare apples and oranges on that, because I don't quite understand applying the state portion of the MET versus applying the MET plus some of the federal match to this. I'm just trying to make sure that I fully understand what it is that we're trying to consider here with these additional funds.
Not at all. Step up. Please state your name and position.
Good morning. For the record, Henry Lippman, the state's Medicaid director. Thank you for the question, Representative Leon. The 91% of the Medicaid enhancement tax comes in, and as Senator Bradley talked about, that the current law, if you will, and the proposal sort of do the same thing in the sense that we look to maximize what the state will have for money to work with, and to provide relief to the hospitals for the uncompensated care and other costs that they incur in serving the program. With respect to the 5.72 million, that is additional funds that otherwise would just be used in the state program, if you will, on the state side. And because the multiplier on the federal match, if you kind of think about it kind of simply, if it were 6 million under the normal match, it would just be, we'd get 12 million out of it. And because there's an enhanced match available under the directed payments, we're able to get that up to 14.3.
Okay, that's helpful. So generally, that means that on the rest of the match on the others, that's what's supporting our other areas of medical care, such as these ones where we're discharging people. I'm trying to understand why I should look at this as 91.5.7, looking at it as a total of 296 million, and not look at it as closer to 305 million, which is the amount that's being distributed within the handouts that we have here.
I mean, I think that the amount of money that gets paid out would be the 290.4 plus the 14.3 to the hospitals. But in terms of what it costs the state in terms of funds that it is putting into the program would be an additional 5.72.
Representative Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lippman, this may not be the appropriate question for you, so if the Senate wanted to respond, that's fine with me. The 5.72 million number, I've been thinking about that, wondering how we came to 5.72, and it strikes me that we have essentially we're all in violent agreement that 91% of the Met tax that comes in should be redistributed appropriately to balance out the hospitals. And that left the 9% to be reprogrammed. And it strikes me that 5.72 gets close to being 2% of the total Met tax. And it just makes me wonder if this 5.72 isn't really just another way to rename it to bring us back to 93%. And if that's what happened, then I don't think I don't perceive that to be acceptable to the governor at all. So I'm just curious about how we pulled 5.72 out, because that's a pretty precise number.
And if the Senate wants to speak to it first, I can. So I think in terms of, as the Senator Bradley talked about, there's a lot of time spent in terms of how can we take the money in and make payments in a way that is, if you will, has a lesser impact on the hospitals and a maximized impact for the state. I think when 91% in the Senate discussions, when 91% was a position that the hospitals weren't supporting, there was what else was available to be able to, if you will, and in what forms we could pay it out that would lead to that, to smooth out the red further. And I think that's basically the number. It's also important to point out it's for 4 years, and it's a constant amount for each of the 4 years. So as the tax grows, that will become a smaller and smaller percentage.
Follow up.
Okay, so I know you're in an awkward position. So what I'm hearing is that the 5.72% is another way of renaming some of the contribution being made to get us close to 93% by way of a different vehicle, but the same destination.
I think it is adding money to the 91%. I think is the simplest way to say it. I don't think there was any, I think the reason it's in the way it is to be explicit of where the money's coming from. That particular model worked better for the hospitals than the straight 93% that was in the original version. That's why it came out that way. My role in this process has not been as a negotiator. It's been to provide information to the parties.
Representative Lamb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This may be a naive question, but when I look at the 319.2 million collected and then the 305 million paid out, to me, that looks like a return rate of 95.5%. Can you tell me how I'm wrong in that interpretation? Because looking at the numbers, that's what makes sense, but I have to be missing something here.
I think in terms of your math, in terms of that's not necessarily wrong when you add the two together, but it may not be 95.2, but it's a higher number than 91. Let's put it that way.
Senator.
Henry, because all these funds that are collected by the Met are restricted funds and must be spent on Medicaid provider payments, don't the hospitals, because of their size and the amount of Medicaid services they deliver, already get above 91% of the Met back in a way through provider payments? Because they do the most Medicaid.
So I guess the payment stream to hospital is what comes out of this, plus the regular payments, which Representative Stringham was talking about. for the larger hospitals. I think generally, not just in New Hampshire, but everywhere, that Medicaid, when you count all the costs, all the payments that they get together, is typically no higher than Medicare and typically somewhat less than Medicare. You know, could be as much as 20% or more for some hospitals, less. So it's the payments together, trying to bring them up to an adequacy. You know, and the sort of the CMS benchmark is to get hospitals under Medicaid between 80 and 100% of Medicare.
Could I follow up, please?
Yes.
And with directed payments, in addition to getting around a 60% federal match versus 50, doesn't CMS either allow or require some quality metrics
Yes.
that would be helpful for the state?
The directed payments do come with accountability, and that's also a provision in the bill that that the directed payments have to come with a set of quality metrics to try to lift up the performance of the system. And you know, in the bill, there's the responsibility to meet those metrics, you know, fall on the hospitals, and that's you know, something that has to be, those metrics have to be developed in state and then approved by CMS.
Senator Bradley?
Yeah, I just want to make clear that the 5.72 is not general fund revenue. It's coming from the Met revenue, and that because of the enhanced match of the 8.6, it's actually, Henry's
14.3.
right, it's actually better. And at the end of the day, it's what I think the hospitals can acquiesce to, and we're not litigating potentially you know, this issue and throwing, you know, the Met tax constitutionality back into question and the impact that that has on future budgets. So I think that if there's a disagreement between some of the parties, that's what it's over. And it's a relatively, in the overall scheme of things and the importance to the state and to the hospitals and patient care in New Hampshire, I think it's a pretty small amount, hopefully, that we can agree to.
I think the time has come for me to return the favor and explain the process by which I came to the opinion I have today. So I was thrown at this very late in the process. Normally, something like this, especially a $5.7 million allocation, would go through our Health and Human Services Committee. If it succeeded there, it would then go to Finance, where a lot of, it's the largest committee, a lot of very smart people would have worked on that and probably answered ahead of time most of the questions that we have today. I have received, I don't want to say threats, but hardcore opinions. I'll veto if this, will sue if that. It's because I am new to this arena and people don't know me. It doesn't help because the House position began at a hard no. There were questions about doing it this way where I had to make sure we weren't even going to violate House rules by receiving the report if there was one. Our beginning position was no. Instead of making a long protracted negotiation, I met with Senator Bradley and said, you know what, fine. We'll do the 91% and the other change to 9. At that point, probably my fault, I had no idea that this $5.7 million was included. I then got questions about, was that just gaming it to get the 93 that we're negotiating down to 91? There is not time to do this properly. So I think that we're being very magnanimous when the House position is we'll do the 91%, the 9%, but not the 5.7 million, and can keep telling me about lawsuits, and my response is going to be, everybody knew this deadline was coming. Why didn't you start working earlier so that it could have gone through the proper process, and maybe I'd be sitting here with a smile and a yes today. But that's not what happened. So I'm sorry, Senator Bradley, but that's the House position.
Say that's unfortunate, but I respect the House, and Respect that you can't get to yes.
I think at this point, we'll just close the committee conference on 1593. Okay.
Okay, we'll reconvene. Actually, we're just come back from our break one more time on House Bill 1127. I guess just as a summary of what happened at 9 o'clock, we went into recess on Tuesday, awaiting legal opinion at the request of Senator Bradley, and we received somewhat of a description of what the problems were, although I was hoping the attorney would be here again so he could actually try again at explaining to everybody what the problems are. So now we've agreed to take another break, and we are here supposedly to see a solution to the problems that the attorney has or observed. So do we have any communication from him?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No. So at this point, the Senate will accede to the House position, where you're going to remove Senate Bill 385,
58.
358 from the bill, and we will move forward with the underlying bill.
Okay. Thank you for that. The motion,
Thank you.
the motion still is there, but before we do take the vote, I just want everybody to be clear that I certainly am in support of what 358 attempted to do. But I've got issues with it the way it was. It seems the Senate didn't like my first amendment. We can't seem to find a solution in a timely fashion. So with remorse, I am going to vote for the motion on the floor, which is to remove 358's language. The motion was we accede to the Senate position with further amendment of removing that language. Anybody else care to speak before we do our vote? Seeing none, House members, all in favor? Okay. And you are as well. So I guess that concludes our business on House Bill 1127. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to House members as well.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am going to call to order what is this, like we recessed yesterday,
Yeah, we're just going to,
Committee of Conference. Okay. Opening the Committee of Conference for House Bill 318, and I will be taking a short recess or a short break while we all have a chance to read the amendment that we were just given.
Oh, good. Was it in there? And that's already in there?
It's already a law.
It's already, well,
there.
okay. All right, I'm reopening the committee conference on House Bill 318. And with that, I believe that we have come to the final agreement. There's one change, that last second change we are going to be making. And that is on page 5 of the, well, I'm not even sure if this is the bill or not. I'm just using the thing you guys gave me. Anyway, the language will be, right now it says the court shall have the authority under paragraph 1 to set cash or corporate surety bail. If the court finds the defendant is indigent, the court may only set cash bail, corporate surety amount in the amount the defendant is able to make. We're striking the part that says the defendant is found indigent. It's just going to say the court may only set cash bail, corporate surety amount, and the amount the defendant is able to make. In other words, so that cash bail is not used to hold someone for the purpose of holding them. Cash bail's intent is to make sure that someone shows up for court, not to hold them so they can't come back. Does everyone here agree with that?
Mr. Chairman, and
yes,
just for anybody
Senator
watching,
Susie.
so on the draft amendment that we have before us, it's on page 4, line 11. On amendment 2285.
Page
Okay.
4, line 11. Yes. And that has been sent to OLS. So what I propose is each member, we're going to vote yea or nay, and we're going to vote with the intent that that is on the document we're going to sign downstairs at OLS. Does everyone agree with that? Yeah. Just crossing out the indigent. What you asked for.
If the court
No, this is going to be strict. If the court finds the defendant indigent, it's going to say the court may only set cash bail. Is that okay?
That's it.
Okay, all right. With that, everything else we are okay with. So I'm going to call a vote. So I would ask Representative Murray, yes or no?
Yes.
Representative Gethright,
Yes.
Representative Rhodes,
Yes.
Senator Bradley. Yes. Senator Carson.
Yes.
Senator Susie.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. With that agreement, we have an accord, and we will all go downstairs and sign it when it's ready. Senator Bradley.
So for those of us in the Senate, this has been a long, hard fight. But I want to compliment the four of you and the work that you have done over the summer to bring parties together. I mean, you guys have done an unbelievable job. And I think, you know, Senator Susie has sponsored this legislation in the past. I've sponsored this legislation in the past. Senator Carson has heard this legislation in the past. The four of you are getting the ball in the end zone, so bless you. Thank you.
We really appreciate the acknowledgement, and we could not have done it without our Senate partners. And I don't want to forget to mention that in the audience, we have another senator who happened to sponsor this a couple of times as well, Senator Darrell Abbott from Salem. So thank you all very much, and we are so happy to have been able to do this for the people of New Hampshire. And we are all hopeful that we do not hear the word bail again for a couple of years anyway. And with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Well done.
Yeah, we have a 1:30 here. Anyone else? You just got to wait at OLS now. Okay, I'm opening the committee of conference, reopening committee conference. Oh, where did Jeb go? Senator Bradley. That's all right. Okay, so I've reopened the committee of conference on House Bill 1292. No changes have been made, I don't believe, from last night. And we are ready to vote on it as is with amendment number 2024-2258H. Does everyone have a copy of that? Okay, and with that, Representative Muse has been replaced on the committee by Representative Smith for the record, and Representative Smith is not able to make it, but he will be making the necessary sign off. So with that, I'm going to call the roll unless someone wants to make any further discussion. No? We already went over this yesterday. This adds to the original bill, the sanctuary city bill that was passed by the Senate and tabled in the House. So with that, I would ask Representative Mannion to vote yes or no.
Yes.
Representative Mannion votes yes. Representative Rhodes,
Yes.
Senator Bradley? Yes. I'm sorry, Senator, your name? Senator Birdsell, and Senator Carson? Yes. And the chair votes yes. Unanimous, and this... You voted yes? Oh, you sure did, yeah. And with that... Thank you. I wouldn't be able to do anything without her because I would just be like passing stuff that nobody voted on. All right, with that, we will send this off to OLS for signature, and I adjourn the hearing. Yeah, you as well. Thank you.